Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And we've got another NBA mock draft video today, but I am switching it up because this is going to be my final NBA mock draft before the NBA draft lottery. And as you can see, the countdown going on screen right now, we are just about 6 days away. I am recording this on May 10th, which is Tuesday. I'm recording it at about 11 p.m. my time. This is going to come out May 11th around 11 a.m. So you're probably going to be seeing it when there's just a little bit over 6 days left. So this is going to be my last NBA mock draft for 2022 before the draft lottery. And then, of course, you can expect one the day after the draft lottery next week. I'm really excited for it. Also, make sure you're checking out the other videos on the channel. I actually have a draft lottery predictions video up, which is going to be really funny. But I'm going to go ahead here and now sim the lottery. And this is going to be the lottery we use in this next mock draft on the channel. And here we go. We have it. We have Orlando picking first. Indiana is now picking second, which is crazy. The Oklahoma City Thunder are picking third. We have Detroit falling down to 4. Houston has the worst case scenario where they fall to 5. Then, of course, the rest of the order is rounded out by record. So then you go with the Blazers, Kings, New Orleans Pelicans, San Antonio Spurs, Wizards, Knicks, Thunder via Clippers, Hornets, and the Cavaliers. So those teams are locked now in place. But crazily enough, in my sim here, Orlando picking first, Indiana second, Oklahoma City third, and Detroit finishing in fourth, which is absolutely crazy. Now let's go ahead and jump over to the actual mock draft portion. And now as we slide over to our actual 2022 NBA mock draft with the lottery simulation, I just want to ask you guys how much you've been enjoying the content. I hope you really have been. I've been spending a ton of time, effort, and energy really going through this draft class specifically. I feel like this is the most time I've ever put into a draft class. And in previous draft classes, I've written over 150 pages of work essentially on some of the prospects. So I do hope that you are enjoying. I do feel like I've spent the most time I've ever spent, again, like I said. So if you are, show your appreciation with a like, and also just leave a comment, something nice that always brightens my day as well as I'm going through the comments, which I do read every single one. And then I'm also going to ask you guys to subscribe quickly. Only about 10% of our viewership is subscribed. We're over 10,000 subscribers, but if all 100% subscribed, we'd be around 100,000 subs, which is obviously a pretty big difference. So again, I just want to say thank you as well to the people who are subscribed to us. And let's go ahead and jump forward with some themes here, specifically when we talk about the NBA Draft Combine, which is coming up within the next week. The NBA Draft Combine actually starts May 17th, and the NBA Draft Lottery is within a week as well. So we're going to have a lot of NBA Draft content coming. Don't worry about that. But I just want to point out that usually at this time of year, we already have all the film. We've seen these kids play in college or overseas or in the G League. We've watched it. We've seen it. What we haven't seen necessarily is how well they physically test, their three-point shooting in drills, that kind of stuff. So these are just some generic barometers I've made that I think really impacts how the draft goes, specifically with draft stock. And I do want to point out that I usually take these into account throughout the season because I'm projecting what they're going to do and how well they're going to perform in these things. So players with length and defensive versatility, like a Jeremy Sohan, tend to move up board. So I'm trying to include that in my mock drafts as of late. When you look at youth, younger players tend to go up boards. A guy like Jeremy Sohan, I think, will get drafted before EJ Liddell, even though Liddell's a more polished product, because Sohan's younger and GMs are going to say, oh, we can coach this kid up. We got 2 extra years, essentially. He's only 19. He's not 21. Usually youth tends to move up the board just a little bit. It's not always true, but I think it's a pretty good indicator. And then raw shooting. I think players who just shoot well throughout the combine tend to move up boards as well. We saw it last year with Quentin Grimes. He kind of went into the draft combine as someone who was maybe on the back end of the second round type of radar, ended up being a high second round selection because of how well he performed specifically as a shooter at the combine. And he's looking like a really good pickup for the Knicks at this point. And then playmaking. I think playmaking is actually one of the biggest helps for players because when you can play make, specifically in 5-on-5 settings where defenses aren't usually set because, draft combine, these guys are all playing with each other for the first time. And then you also have to try and, orchestrate offense. The players who can dribble the ball and, make good decisions on the fly usually go up boards as well. So I think the better playmakers in this class are going to get risen up boards a little bit as well. Again, none of these things are going to absolutely crazily shake up the board, but I do think they affect it a little bit. So I did take that into account in this video. I've been taking into account with a lot of videos. I think for those who have been watching me, know that I really don't care about consensus. I don't care what people are saying. Point an example, Jay Billis, I saw it on Twitter, said that Jaden Ivey was the 5th best player in this class. I quite frankly don't care. I'm going to evaluate the players with my own eyes. It's my eye test, not theirs. This is my content, not theirs. I don't care what they're saying. I care what I'm saying, and I care my opinion on it, which is what I'm sharing here. And again, this is not a big board. It's a mock draft. So I still have to look at what the GMs might do. But let's be honest about it. A GM doesn't care what Jay Billis has to say about a player. A GM cares what their own eye test tells them as well. So I feel like this is actually a pretty healthy exercise to do. And now we're here. Pick 1, the Orlando Magic. They won the lottery in our lottery simulation. And I have them drafting Jaden Ivey, which is a big switch up from where I was a couple of weeks ago when I made my number 1 overall pick. This team would select video, because in that video, I thought they would take Jabari Smith. And I've changed course. I think Jaden Ivey, if Orlando had the 1st overall pick, would be the selection, at least at this point. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, they took Suggs last year. They have Markelle Fultz. They have Cole Anthony. In a league that is dominated by ball handlers, specifically the pick and roll. And let's just look at the teams that, are still playing at this point. You've got the Miami Heat, who are obviously just a great all-around team with Jimmy Butler being their best player. They're the, kind of unique example. You've got the Philadelphia 76ers yet, who James Harden's a ball-dominant pick and roll ball handler. Obviously, he's not been playing his best basketball, but he's still a key part of that team. You look at a team like the Warriors. Steph Curry runs a ton of pick and rolls every game. Not as much as some of these other guys, but still quite a bit. High usage pick and roll player. You look at the Dallas Mavericks, Luka, that's their entire offense. The Phoenix Suns, that's their entire offense. Celtics run a ton of pick and roll with Brown and Tatum. I mean, the NBA is a pick and roll league, and Jaden Ivey is going to be the best pick and roll ball handler from this class. And if you have an opportunity to go from a solid pick and roll ball handler and a guy like Cole Anthony to a potentially great one in Jaden Ivey, that's the type of risk you take. I don't care what you have at that position. They won 20 games this year, okay? Like, this Orlando team is not elite. They need to get better at a bunch of areas. You can make the same case on why they shouldn't draft a forward, because Jonathan Isaac's going to be coming back from injury. And to be honest with you, I think Jaden Ivey is just so much better than anyone they have on their roster right now anyway, that this is actually the pick I would make as well. Of course, my mock drafts are about what I think would happen. But I think Orlando, if they look themselves in the mirror honestly, they would say, yeah, Jaden Ivey would be our best ball handler on day 1. I would agree with that, and Orlando gets way better with this selection. Then we move on to pick number 2, and this is where we have the Indiana Pacers, who also got very lucky in this lottery simulation and moved up to number 2. So Pacers fans, I know how excited you are by this potential outcome. And with the Pacers at this spot, I think they would take Chet Holmgren. And Chet Holmgren's the most divisive player in this class. Some people love him, some people hate him, some people are skeptical, some people really believe in the talent. And there is a ton of talent here. He shot 39% from 3. And at his size, there's just not 7-footers who can handle the ball like he does, can play make out of the post or off the perimeter, can bring it up in transition, makes the right play consistently. Oh, and by the way, he's also pretty much the best rim protector in this class. There's other guys in this class as well, like Walker Kessler, Jalen Duren, and also Mark Williams, who are good. But this is perfect here in Indiana, because you look at what Miles Turner can be as, a defensive force around the rim, and he's a fairly physical big on the defensive end. You can get away then with playing Holmgren as the 4. Both of those two guys can stretch it out to the perimeter. You add a really intriguing high-low offense potentially with Holmgren and also Miles Turner. I mean, it's an intriguing duo for sure. And they already have Tyrese Halliburton. They drafted Chris Duarte last year. So they're in a position here where they could look at, some of the other options. Jabari Smith was here. I definitely considered that. I considered Paulo Banchero, who would give them a little bit more half-court scoring punch as a creator. But ultimately here, I think they go massive upside, take Chet Holmgren, who could potentially become the best player from this class. Then moving into pick 3, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. And with OKC also moving up just one spot here, there's a bunch of options on the table, but I think the obvious one here would have to be Jabari Smith. In fact, I considered him 1 to Orlando. I considered him 2 to Indiana. And I think 3 is the absolute floor for Jabari Smith. I just don't see him going below Paolo Banchero in this class. And I think he's really, really close in where he's going to go with Jaden Ivey and Chet Holmgren. If Jabari Smith's the first overall pick, I will not be shocked. He's one of those players that people are going to love because of the potential. I think people are starting to assume he's further along in his development than he really is. He's a talented player for sure, specifically as a shot maker. He makes a ton of tough shots with defenders draped all over him, but he does not handle the ball super well at this point of his development. Now, again, I think he could probably get there at some point, but for me, he's someone who is going to at least be a really, really good contributor. And, at the very worst, he becomes a shot-making 4, a Danilo Gallinari type, which is a pretty good outcome. And I'm not talking about Nuggets Danilo Gallinari. I'm talking more so like Clippers Danilo Gallinari. But that's the absolute floor here for a player like Jabari Smith. And the ceiling, it's not quite Kevin Durant, but it's probably an elevated John Collins, which is really, really dangerous. And Oklahoma City badly needs front court help. They get it in an immense way here with a player who has really special defensive upside with that length I talked about in the open. And then also exactly what he could be as a shot maker next to Shea and Josh Giddey and Lou Dort and Trey Mann. You're looking at a really intriguing team here now in Oklahoma City. Pick 4, Detroit. They obviously got the worst luck here, moving down to 4. Well, not quite the worst luck. We'll get to that team next. But Detroit at 4 definitely did not have the lottery play out for them the way that they wanted, but they're still a really good player here in Paolo Banchero. And for me, I have a really intriguing ceiling and floor for him that has been kind of stuck in my head based on the way that he plays. So I'm going to run it by you guys. I want your thoughts on this ceiling and floor comparison here for Banchero. For the floor, I see him kind of as a Tobias Harris type player where he can be an efficient scoring 4, probably doesn't do a lot as a playmaker, not the best defender, but is serviceable and someone that teams would like to have on their roster. And I think the upside is like a New York Knicks version of Carmelo Anthony, where he becomes such a great offensive player. And I think really the reason why that's stuck in my head so well is just how dominant he is in the mid post area. I mean, you can feed him the ball in post ups. He can lull people to sleep off the perimeter as well and knock it down in the mid range area with a nice jump shot. He's a really smooth, polished offensive player. You put him in Detroit next to the Marvin Bagleys and Isaiah Stewarts, and this is your really talented front court player that you put next to Cade Cunningham. I think it's a really good outcome for Detroit. I really do, and I think this is a perfect way to continue building, even though they moved down to 4, which again is not the biggest and best outcome for them, but I still think a pretty solid one, the fact that you're landing Paolo Banchero at this spot. Moving on to 5 now, we've got the Houston Rockets here. And this was the worst case scenario for Houston, right? So Houston fans, I feel you right now. This is the worst outcome, but there's a 52% chance that this happens. 48% chance you stay in the top 4, which is pretty decent odds. I mean, it's a coin toss, but 52% chance you're at 5, which this is the worst case, but it's a potential outcome. And I think it's worth talking about here because in a lot of my mocks, Houston's just been picking number 1. But now at pick 5, it's a little bit of a different scenario. And I'm going with a unique route here. I'm mocking Shaedon Sharpe, the kid out of Kentucky who never played a game for the Wildcats. And Rockets fans might be a little perplexed by this because they might say, oh, he's kind of a similar type of breed to a Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. And I agree to that to a certain extent. But this kid's so athletic. I think his shot creation potential is so high. I think he's going to be competitive defensively. And the fact here that you're drafting someone at 5 that we're comparing to the player you took number 2 overall last year and all your fans were super happy about should go to show how great this kid could be. Getting him 5th overall, this is the highest potential pick, okay? This is the player that if you're buying in on here at this spot, you could sell yourself him becoming a franchise player next to Jalen Green. And then ultimately, if you have 2 franchise level guys, you didn't really care about the 5th. You've got 2 young players on rookie contracts who both could become elite. Jalen Green, the way he ended the season was so huge for this Rockets team. just giving, more of a better outlook for the squad. And then you add in a player like Shaedon Sharpe, who I think could be really good off the ball as a cutter and someone who in transition is going to be phenomenal. Just like how Jalen Green is, you have two of the highest flying guards in the league. Houston's going to at least be must-watch TV, and I think down the road could actually become really, really dangerous with that duo. Pick 6, we move on to Portland now. And with Portland here at this spot, I feel like the pick is pretty obvious about who they would go with. I think Keegan Murray here out of Iowa just makes a ton of sense. Some people I could see having him in the top 5. I definitely did consider it a little bit here for Houston. He would have fit them pretty well, but I think it just makes more sense going into Portland. They're ready to win a little bit more right now than a team like Houston is. I know Portland made a ton of questionable moves at the deadline, but they've positioned themselves in a way that they have cap space this offseason, a high draft pick here, a healthy Damian Lillard, Yusuf Nurkic probably coming back, a more developed Anthony Simons. That's a pretty decent grouping to have. Chauncey Billups got a lot of coaching experience, dealing with an inexperienced roster. He had to figure a lot of things out. And Portland, I think they found something in Brandon Williams. I think Trendon Watford could be a consistent player for them off the bench to a certain extent. And I think this team does have some bright spots moving forward. I think that, a Keegan Murray selection does make a lot of sense because he's going to do a lot of work off the ball. And that's what you really need when you have the trio of Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, and to a lesser extent, Brandon Williams, because those three guys do just like to have the ball in their hands. They're better with the ball in their hands. So there's not going to be a lot of offense ran through a guy like Keegan Murray. But that's okay, because for the Hawkeyes this past year, they didn't really run their offense through him. It was fairly equal opportunity. He moved the ball when he had to, but he also was able to take the game by the throat when he needed to, and did a lot of nice stuff for Iowa this past season. I think he's worthy of a top 10 selection, and I think Portland gets a good, consistent player here at this spot in the front court, which is something I can't really say they've had over the last 5 to 6 years, really. Pick 7, Sacramento Kings here now, and of course, the Domantas Sabonis trade was huge for this team, finding an identity and really establishing who their big-time guard was going to be over the next 5 to 10 years. They opted for De'Aaron Fox over Tyrese Halliburton, and Fox did play well toward the end of the season. So there's a lot of hope and optimism that maybe that Fox and Sabonis pairing could be a really natural fit. And then here you have to add something to it, and I'm going with Benedict Mathurin out of Arizona, a player who could be a really consistent three-point shooter, both off the bounce and off the catch. And I think someone who adds a little bit more vertical athleticism to this team that just, I think, needs a little bit more. Outside of Chimezie Metu, I just don't know how much this team really has in terms of vertical impact. I think that you're going to see Mathurin's athleticism on both ends of the floor. I also think he's going to be someone who becomes a primary on-ball defender for this Kings team, which is really nice because you already have someone to lock down guards in Davion Mitchell. I was really high on him last year. I think that was a phenomenal pickup from Sacramento. But I also think now that Benedict Mathurin is someone who's going to be reliably able to guard wings and really knock down an open shot as well. So there's a lot of upside here to a Mathurin selection. I really like this kid. He's one of my favorite players to watch from this class. And I do have him right around this number 7 spot on my big board. So I think it's a very warranted pick. At 8, we got the New Orleans Pelicans here now, and a team that, really has set themselves up for success. David Griffin definitely was really risky with some of his decisions this season, trading a pick that was going to go to Portland. Had they not finished in the playoffs, they are now at a spot where they have the Lakers pick, and their pick is actually, outside the lottery. So it worked out perfectly. New Orleans got to the playoffs. They probably saved their jobs, and they still have a top 10 pick to play with, which is why they can take a huge risk here. And I don't even think this is a big risk. This is a player I have very high on my board. I really like this kid, Jalen Duren from Memphis. And, Pelicans fans, I can hear you now. Oh, we don't need this. What do you exactly need, right? Jonas Valanciunas at center. CJ McCollum's your lead guard. Brandon Ingram's really good with the ball in his hands. We're going to probably see more Point Zion moving forward once he's healthy. You don't really have a need. What you do need is just more raw talent and upside, because it's really what could swing this team into a championship level team 2-3 years from now. And I think Jalen Duren could be the Bam Adebayo from this class, as someone who could really develop as a beast on the defensive end of the floor, whether you're employing him in drop coverage or you're using him as a contained defender in ice coverage, or you could potentially even look at him becoming one of the most switchable bigs in the league. He's not the biggest big in this class. He's not a 7-footer like a guy like Mark Williams or Walker Kessler or Chet Holmgren, but he's very, very good out in space, and he's got really great athleticism, and he's a physical monster. He's able to go up sky and get rebounds. He boxes out fairly well, and I think he's going to be someone who New Orleans, once you kind of move past the Valanciunas stage of this team, you'll have Duren in the fold waiting to become the guy at the center position. I think this is actually really perfect for New Orleans. I struggled with this selection, but I think Duren is obviously the guy that I would opt for just with where I have him on my board. Pick 9, San Antonio here now. And the Spurs, 3 first-round picks this year. They made it to the play-in, had a really competitive season, and everything hinges on DeJounte Murray. I would have mocked them Jalen Duren had he been here at this spot. Since he goes to New Orleans, it does complicate things a little bit. But I mock here AJ Griffin out of Duke, a player who maybe doesn't have the size at the position that you're going to want to play at the 4. But what he is a really good shooter. I know San Antonio's got a ton of wings right now. They've also got a ton of guards. You're really looking for a center or a power forward in San Antonio. I get it. AJ Griffin maybe is a tweener forward where he can play a little bit of the 3, a little bit of the 4. He is only 6'6", so that might be a little bit of a red flag. But he's a top 9 player in this class. He's going to go in the top 9. And the fact that he was at this point what I would deem the best player available leads me to believe San Antonio would take him. This is an instant upgrade over Doug McDermott or some of the other wings that they've been playing in certain spots. I think that he's capable to play the 4 in San Antonio, next to Jakob Poeltl. I think that's pretty good. And they also do have 2 other first-round picks to play with to address other needs. So this is kind of best player available. He does play as a forward, maybe not a true power forward all the time, though. Pick 10, Washington Wizards here now. And Washington is always one of the teams that I struggle to mock a little bit because they've got such a vast collection of forwards, specifically with recent draft additions in guys like Denny Avdia, Rui Hachimura. Last year they took Corey Kispert. Of course, they acquired Kyle Kuzma via trade. They also have a few centers on the roster, and just now with Duren off the board already, I don't see them taking one at this spot. So I went with guard Johnny Davis here out of Wisconsin. I think he's a talented guard. This might raise some eyebrows on draft night because of Bradley Beal. There's always going to be rumors around Beal. Is he leaving Washington? Is he staying? Regardless of if he stays or goes, Johnny Davis is just flat out a good player. He's going to guard his position well, and he's going to be someone who matches up very well offensively too next to Beal because he can also create his shot. We're going to see something similar to what Devin Booker and Chris Paul are, but to a much lesser extent. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying Washington's going to be the next Phoenix. They're not going to be. But Johnny Davis is going to be a good player in the NBA. And I think someone who is able to knock down shots off the dribble and someone who's going to defend with heart, energy, and effort. And I think for Washington, given the upside you could potentially have with Porzingis there now, with Kuzma, you just want to bring in someone who's going to be a consistent playing guard for you. And I think it was a little too high to draft a point guard. So looking at Johnny Davis, I just thought he made the most sense at this spot. Pick 11, New York Knicks here now. And the Knicks, another team that's really difficult to mock for because you have to ask yourself, what's the involvement of Tom Thibodeau in this selection? If he's heavily involved, we know it's going to be defense. If not, they could be looking at maybe a point guard. They could look at a center just naturally, or they could look for a high upside player. For me, what I opted for here is a high upside defensive player in Jeremy Sohan. I'm clearly thinking that Tom Thibodeau is going to have some decent level of involvement in this selection. Sohan's a really special defensive product, and I think he's going to be someone who we maybe start talking about as a top 10 pick if he has a really great draft combine. Now, the one issue here, offensively, he's limited. Okay, he is not the best ball handler at this point. He's not someone who's going to ever be a primary playmaker, and he's not going to be someone who ever knocks down a shot at a 40% clip. I just don't believe any of those things are possible for him. His jump shot is really ugly right now. The mechanics are all broken. It's going to take a wonderful shot doctor to fix what Jeremy Sohan's has going on. We've seen other players in the past transform their jump shots and become respectable in the NBA. And if he does that, he could be a massive steal here at pick 11. But defensively, he is so special that he still warrants this selection because he can guard legitimately 1 through 5 on a possession-to-possession basis. He can switch out on the perimeter. I talked about it with Duren as potential. Sohan's there. Now, he's not as big and strong as Duren, and maybe not going to be the rebounder that Duren could be at the NBA level, but he's going to be able to front in the post. He's going to be able to hedge out and double out in space. He's going to be able to switch out in space and take him one-on-one. And he's also going to be a tempo pusher. I think he's someone who works probably as a tertiary playmaker. Think the Draymond Green role offensively. That's where I see Sohan fitting in the NBA. Now, that little niche doesn't work everywhere. You know, Draymond Green luckily plays next to two of the best shooters of all time, and Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. You know, and now Jordan Poole's joined the party as well. So there's a lot of talent in Golden State there that really allows Draymond Green to be the guy that he is. New York, I don't think they quite have that at this point. But at the same time, Jeremy Sohan is a very good player just in general. And if you're looking for someone who can help you defensively, Sohan's your guy. Pick 12, Oklahoma City Thunder here now. Again, remember earlier we went with Jabari Smith at pick 3, which I think was a really good pickup for this Thunder team. And then at this spot, I have him going with Mark Williams. I have narrowed it down to front court for Oklahoma City since the start of the process. They need to get better in the front court. I believe in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he could be an all-NBA player at some point of his career. I think Josh Giddey's a very good starting guard. And I think that Lou Dort's a very good player as well. Someone who probably fits best as your fifth starter or six-man type role. And ultimately, I feel like he already fits that if you draft Jabari Smith and Mark Williams, because Jabari Smith has really high potential defensively as someone who can guard out space on the perimeter. Just with his length, he's going to be disruptive, moves his feet fairly well, but also can be a weak side rim protector. And then Mark Williams is kind of your traditional pick and roll rim running big man. You're not going to feed him the ball in the post. He's not going to be a back to the basket scorer, but he is going to punish switches, and he's going to be someone who's a consistent lob threat for the other playmakers on this team. Josh Giddey would love to play with a guy like this. I think, Josh Giddey's going to get so much better if you give him a big man like Mark Williams, because Josh Giddey, we know how much he likes to, throw risky passes in the paint. He always has his eyes up, looking for the best pass to score, specifically around the rim. You give him a big threat like Mark Williams around the rim, who's a great lob catcher and finisher. I think it just makes so much sense here for Oklahoma City to grab Mark Williams. I wouldn't be shocked if a team tries to move up for Mark Williams just because of the risk here of Oklahoma City taking him at 12. Pick 13, we've got the Charlotte Hornets now. And this is a team that maybe would have looked at Mark Williams had he been here. This is maybe one of the teams that could move up to get him if he was available still at this spot, but he's not. So I have them going with Kansas forward Ochai Agbaji, which maybe seems a little counterintuitive at this point in time, because on the roster still they have Miles Bridges, Gordon Hayward, and Kelly Oubre, and PJ Washington. I'm expecting some moves. Okay, Mitch Kupchak, one of the best GMs in all of basketball. I really do believe that. I think he's a very smart guy. I think he's a great talent evaluator. He's going to look at this team, and I think we're going to see a Gordon Hayward trade. And I think Kelly Oubre, even though he had a really nice season off the bench this past year for Charlotte, they're going to look at maybe some offers for him as well. I think that they believe in James Bouknight still, who they drafted in the lottery last year. And I think they believe in Kai Jones, who they took last year as well, a little bit after the lottery. Charlotte, they do a great job finding talent. They've done it in the last 4 or 5 years. They've drafted a lot of really good players. And Ochai Agbaji here is another example of just a really good player. He's someone who I continue to liken him to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's going to be good and reliable on both ends of the floor, and he can fill in probably anywhere as a 2 or 3. I think he's able to guard a bunch of different wings. He's going to be able to play a little bit smaller against some, 3s or 4s, and I think he's going to be able to guard 2s very well as well. He's got really quick feet, and he's a nice catch and shoot guy off the perimeter. I don't have a lottery grade on Ochai Agbaji. I have him just outside the lottery in terms of where I would actually want to draft him, but I don't think this is a bad pick here for Charlotte, because I think just given the fact that they also had pick 15, I think Cleveland would have taken him at 14 had he still been available, but they take him at 13 and they mortgage the risk here that Cleveland would take a big, which I just don't think is going to happen. 14, Cleveland Cavaliers here now. And like I said, I just don't think they would take another big. They've already got so many 6'10" guys on their roster. They're going to be looking for a guard or forward. And I'm going massive upside here. Big swing here for the Cleveland Cavaliers on Jaden Hardy, who gets probably one of the most hate in the class for all the prospects. And I made a community post on the channel the other day talking about Jaden Hardy and comparing his numbers, his raw numbers, to Jonathan Kuminga. Now, raw numbers don't tell the whole story, okay? That's a really casual thing to think if you believe that. Raw numbers do not tell you everything, but at 6'4", he's a pretty decently sized guard. He's going to be a combo guard. He's going to be able to play with the ball in his hands, but can also function off of it without the ball a little bit as a backdoor cutter and someone who is very athletic. And he averaged 17 points a game for G League Ignite. In a 12-game sample size, he shot about 35% from the field and about 27% from three. And that's where everyone's going to be like, whoa, I don't want to take this guy. Jonathan Kuminga in the G League in 13 games shot 37% from the field and 24% from three. Okay, and he still went in the top 10. Now, I don't think Hardy has the defensive characteristics or traits that Jonathan Kuminga had. And don't get me wrong here, I love Jonathan Kuminga last year. I thought Jonathan Kuminga was going to be a great pickup. I thought the Warriors killed it with that draft pick. And I think they're way better because of that selection. I think Kuminga is a better prospect than Jaden Hardy. But I do think Jaden Hardy is someone with really immense upside as a creator. There's players in this draft that cannot dribble the ball and create for themselves like Jaden Hardy can. He is right there with Johnny Davis in that regard. And there's a chance here that Jaden Hardy could be a top 5 player from this class, which if you're picking at 14, there's not a lot of guys you can say that about. That's just the reality. Jaden Hardy is someone who I think with the right development could become really, really special. There's also a chance that he flames out of the league in 4 or 5 years. That's really the risk reward here. But if you're Cleveland, you sell yourself on the idea that we have Garland already. Colin Sexton's going to be coming back from injury, assuming that they keep him. Evan Mobley's going to be awesome. Jared Allen's already awesome. We already have a bunch of really great players. Lauri Markkanen's good with us. We don't need this pick necessarily to become a really good team long term. But if Jaden Hardy hits, watch out for Cleveland. That's what you're selling yourself on. And realistically, I love this plan for Cleveland. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Attention listeners, are you ready to be blown away? Well, you asked for it and they listened. Our friends at Manscaped just relaunched the Ultra Smooth package. It's back, baby. Your new favorite tool and complement to the Lawnmower 4.0 to keep your boy smooth while looking and feeling their best. The specialized groin shaving kit is here to help you buff, protect, and shave your most sensitive areas. It's time to crop that bush of yours and get right to the roots with a discount just for you from Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you use code utility20 at manscaped.com. Again, use code utility20 at manscaped.com. After Mother's Day and treating the women in your life, it's now time to treat yourself, men. You deserve it. Pick up the Ultra Smooth package at manscaped.com and use code utility20 for 20% off plus free shipping. Moving on to 15, we got Charlotte here now, like I talked about. 13, they went with Ochai Agbaji, and now at 15, they get to draft the guy that they maybe would have taken at 13, but they felt no pressure from Cleveland to take him, and that's Walker Kessler here, center out of Auburn. Very good pickup here, just outside the lottery. I think it's right around where that value is for him. I could see him going in the back end of the lottery as well. He's a really consistent rim protector, and he averaged 4.5 blocks a game for Auburn. You just can't make that kind of numbers up. For a team like Duke, we talked about Mark Williams, how good he is as a rim protector. Duke averaged 6.5 blocks a game as a team for most of the season. Walker Kessler alone averaged 4.5. This is a legitimate rim protector who's going to be able to anchor a defense. Now, he's not as versatile as a player like Jalen Duren or Mark Williams, and that's why he goes a little bit lower in this mock draft, because teams are going to look at those other guys and say, well, the upside's higher, which I think it is. But Walker Kessler, in drop coverage, I think he's going to be elite. I really liken him a lot to Jakob Poeltl, who I think is a really good big in this league, specifically on the defensive end. I think Walker Kessler can find himself in a similar role down the line. Pick 16, Atlanta Hawks here now. They're a little sad to see Walker Kessler go off the board as well. But at this spot, there's another good defensive player who maybe has some offensive upside to him, and that's Tari Eason out of LSU. A player I think at this point I'm notoriously not super high on, but I've said it in other videos. I feel like I struggle to evaluate the players who are just physically better than other players rather than skill set oriented better than other players, because I just don't expect it to translate as well as it does sometimes. Tari Eason is a very good physical player with great strength, good size, good speed. The former Cincinnati Bearcat who transferred to LSU for his sophomore season is just flat out a good basketball player. I mean, he was on display this year for LSU. They started the year off phenomenally, kind of got into a tailspin a little bit, ended up having their head coach fired because of some issues when it comes to recruiting and the money he was handing out illegally. But ultimately here, the LSU prospect in Tari Eason probably still does go in the top 20. I think Atlanta is a good landing spot for him, just given the fact that he does bring a physical element that I think they're lacking at certain points. Pick 17. Houston here now, and the Rockets at this spot. There's a few things you could consider for sure. And for me, I'm going with guard Ousmane Dieng out of the NBL, New Zealand Breakers guard. And he's someone who I really consider putting in the lottery. And I think there's a good chance he still gets there. But at the same time, I talked about raw shooting being something that could elevate players. He only shot about 28% from three this past year for the Breakers, which is not great. But the one thing about him is it's not like he's shooting open jump shots. He's shooting off the move, off the dribble, step back type of threes with hands in his face. Okay, he's shooting competitive 3-point shots. He's not reluctant. He's not afraid to shoot them. In fact, teams were guarding him fairly heavily, and he was able to put some of those in still. I think there's really high upside here with a player like Ousmane Dieng, who stands about 6'8", is a true point guard type, but could also play as a point forward in his career, and someone who actually puts a little bit of pressure on the rim. Houston needs a point guard. And this is really complicated here because we already gave them Shaedon Sharpe, also went with Ousmane Dieng here. This doesn't really address all their needs, but also here, if you're Houston, you look at yourself and say, given where we were at in this mock, just the fact that our first pick fell down to 5 and our other pick here is just at 17, we're probably not going to be able to turn ourselves into a playoff team right away. So let's go upside here. Let's go upside oriented. If only one of Sharpe or Dieng booms, it's still one player that boomed from this class, which is huge. For Houston, you're giving yourself pretty decent odds on one of these players being really, really good for you down the road. And who knows, maybe even both are. And then you're at the spot where you maybe have too many good players and you don't really know what to do with them. And then you reconstruct your roster via trade. Rafael Stone's made a lot of trades already in his short time as a GM. And I wouldn't put it past him to make more to really, retrofit this roster. 18 now, we got the Chicago Bulls here. And for me with Chicago, there's a few things that they could consider. But ultimately, it all comes down to depth. Had, Walker Kessler or Mark Williams been here, I think that's the no-brainer pick. They need a backup big really badly, but they're not here at this spot. So I'm going with EJ Liddell instead from Ohio State. He gets to stay in that awesome red, black, and white concept now, going from Ohio State to the Chicago Bulls. The former Buckeye, very, very talented on both ends of the floor. Like I said, I think he's further along in his development than Jeremy Sohan. He's a consistent rim protector as a weak side guy. He's not going to anchor a defense by any stretch, but he's like the perfect type of 4 you would want to put next to Nikola Vucevic, who struggles at times on the defensive end of the floor. He's also talented offensively, can knock down an open 3 ball, and is someone who is able to put the ball on the deck a little bit. Now, it's probably not going to be the main part of your offense, but we've seen Patrick Williams really improve on the offensive end in his short career so far. Obviously he's dealt with a lot of injuries, but I think Chicago here needs a reliable front court player to add behind Vucevic, Patrick Williams, and the like. And I think EJ Liddell is probably best case scenario here at the spot 18. Number 19 now, Minnesota. The Timberwolves would have taken EJ Liddell had he been here, which is obviously the fun little maneuvering back and forth here between these teams. Some of these teams might feel pressure to move up. If a guy like EJ Liddell's there at 18, they might want to move up to 17, try and get the risk to go get a guy. And I think Minnesota would have fallen into that case had I been doing trades. But instead, I'm going with guard Ty Washington here from Kentucky. And now Minnesota fans, they might feel a little split on this. I know a lot of Wolves fans do not like D'Angelo Russell all of a sudden. I know a lot of them still love D'Angelo Russell. I think D'Angelo Russell's a good player. Now, is he a championship point guard? That's a little bit more iffy, but at the same time, the Wolves are just, I don't think, in a position to win a championship. So I don't think you need to hastily move off of D'Angelo Russell either. But I think that you should explore with your point guard position a little bit. Jordan McLaughlin, I know he played pretty decently against the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm just not the biggest J-Mac believer. I think he's a decent point guard to play throughout the regular season, but he has some serious limitations. Ty Washington, however, he has his own limitations as well. There's a reason he's going 19th overall in my mock draft here. but he's someone who is a capable pick and roll ball handler. And when D'Angelo Russell goes off the floor, I think you would like to have another guy to come in and run the pick and roll consistently. And I think Ty Washington's actually a pretty consistent playmaker for others. And I think that's going to be huge, involving others in the pick and roll game, and being someone who is going to make open shots when he has them. He's not the highest volume 3-point shooter, but he shoots an okay clip when he takes them. And I think he's also someone who puts a little bit more pressure on the defenses in the mid-range area, which right now for Minnesota, that's kind of iffy on how much mid-range shot creation you're getting, especially when D'Angelo Russell's out of the game. So I think adding a Ty Washington is really huge in that regard. Pick 20, we got the San Antonio Spurs here now. And I think for San Antonio, there's a few things that you could look at. Obviously, we went with AJ Griffin earlier. And now at this spot, we're going to find that 4. We're going to go ahead with Nikola Jovic here, playing in the Mega Basket over in Serbia. He's a very talented player. You know, FIBA U19 World Cup, he really got a lot of exposure in that. And I think started going up boards there because he was used as a point forward at times. And I think offensively is really gifted. You could look at him as a small forward offensively with the talent that he has and possesses. He's able to knock down open shots. He's able to drive the basketball. He can make the right pass. The biggest thing, though, defensively, he struggles. He's not going to move his feet super well. He plays a little soft. I know that's the narrative that usually comes with these players. I don't apply that narrative. I think some of these players coming from overseas actually have really good chips on their shoulders and play competitive defensively. But San Antonio here, you know, I don't think they need a defensive player. They have Jakob Poeltl and Keldon Johnson. They've got good defensive players already on this team. Poeltl's going to be huge for Jovic just because you already have a player who's able to protect the rim. You can probably utilize Jovic more than defensively, because even if he gets blown by, it's not an automatic bucket because of Poeltl and the other defensive players on this team already at the spot. We already talked about AJ Griffin as well, who they drafted in this mock. And I think Jovic offensively, you have 2 really good shooters now in the folds in this draft in AJ Griffin and Nikola Jovic. Shooting isn't everything, but it always helps, especially around a pick and roll guard like DeJounte Murray, who's taken massive steps forward in his own right. 21, Denver Nuggets here now, and we avoided the bullet here of Denver drafting Nikola Jovic to put next to now 2-time MVP Nikola Jokic. But the Nuggets here at 21, I have them going with guard Hugo Bassan. And Tim Connolly, I think, is just one of the best talent evaluators in the NBA draft. When it comes to the NBA draft, when it comes just in the NBA in general, I think he's a phenomenal talent evaluator. He did it with Jamal Murray, did it with Nikola Jokic. He, had Yusuf Nurkic as well at one point. He finds good players wherever they come from, whether they come overseas, whether they're from the United States, it doesn't matter. He finds good players. Did it with Bones Highland this past year as well. I was really high on Bones Highland. I had him in my top 14 last year. He ended up getting him in the 20s. Again, Hugo Bassan, I currently have him 14th on my big board. He's a very good combo guard who stands about 6'5", maybe 6'4.5". He's got playmaking potential. He's going to be 21 years old by the day of the draft. So, he's not the youngest player in the class by any means, but I think he's way further along in his development, specifically with the ball in his hands. I think he could be a unique combo guard for this team. And I think we saw it when Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray were out. This team just did not have enough perimeter scoring and perimeter ball handling. The one thing here with Bassan is he's really, really raw defensively. He is not very good technically, and I think his fundamentals are way out of whack. But for me, I think it's coachable. This is a type of kid who, started his playing career in France, then played in New Zealand with the Breakers this past year. He's got a competitive edge to him, and he's going to be someone who wants to get better and wants to be a really good NBA player, and I think he's going to be. I think Hugo Bassan is going to make a lot of money in his career. I think he's going to have a nice long career, and I think Denver here gets a really nice player and someone who is going to be really vital in trying to win a championship at some point. 22, Memphis Grizzlies here now. This pick comes from the Utah Jazz in the Mike Conley deal. And with Memphis, I have them going with forward Kendall Brown out of Baylor, who I think is a really nice pickup at this spot of the draft. And he has the length that I talked about that would help players usually rise up in the draft process, but he's not at a point where he feels super confident doing anything offensively if it's not open court transition play or against a really bad closeout. He's a reluctant shooter. He shot only about 1-3 a game this past year for Baylor with fluctuating results. Okay, he did not shoot consistently on very low volume, which is automatically going to be a red flag for teams. So unless he's completely transformed his 3-point shot in the last 2 months, we're going to see a little bit of concerns coming from GMs through the next couple of weeks through the NBA draft combine. But what he is a nice lengthy defender who's going to be disruptive at times. He's going to be able to drive the ball against, bad closeouts. He's going to be able to put pressure on the rim. And he's also someone who I think is a connecting piece where he can make the right pass. There's a lot of development ahead of him yet. He's not a finished product, and that's okay. He's 19 years old at the time I'm recording this. He's a young kid. He's going to be able to get better, and I'm not saying that the development path is done for him. But at this current point, there are some flaws in his game, and I think Memphis is one of the best landing spots because Kyle Anderson's headed toward free agency. He can automatically fit in there, and Taylor Jenkins has shown his ability to develop players. We've already seen Zaire Williams improve massively his rookie season. John Morant voted most improved player. Whether or not you agree with that decision, there's no denying he's gotten way better since his rookie season. I would put a lot of that toward Ja, but then you can look at Jaren Jackson, who's gotten way better. Dylan Brooks has improved immensely. Desmond Bane has taken massive steps forward. This Memphis team continues to develop all of their players, which is why we saw such a massive step forward for them. So if a team can develop Kendall Brown, I'm pretty confident that Memphis is the team to do it. Brooklyn here at 23, and the Nets, I think when this past postseason played out, we saw some inherent flaws with the way they built this roster, specifically from their guard spots. They had a lineup where you tried playing Goran Dragic, and you tried playing with that. You had Kyrie Irving, and you had Seth Curry. And those are three good individual players. Kyrie, obviously a star. Seth Curry, I think, a really good starting player. And I think, Goran Dragic at this point of his career, a good role player. But those three players just did not work together because they're way too small. And when you ran out to a team like Boston, who is a title contender, they are big, fast, strong, and they're going to target those guards. So you need a bigger defensive guard who can get the job done in that end of the floor, and that's Dyson Daniels. Brooklyn goes from a really bad defensive team to maybe a sneaky good one next year, especially if they keep Nick Claxton in free agency, because he's a very switchable big. You add Ben Simmons into the mix, and then also Dyson Daniels comes in here as a player who's able to guard 1 through 3 on day one of his career, and you go from having 0 consistently good perimeter defenders to at least 2 in Simmons and Dyson Daniels. I don't think that, the offensive fit is perfect, specifically with Ben Simmons, because Dyson Daniels, who also is Australian, funny enough, so you'd have the 2 of the Australian guards in the league in both Simmons and Daniels. But Daniels doesn't shoot the 3-ball well, and he's more so of the variety of he's going to get left open, whereas compared to a guy like what we saw from Ousmane Dieng, who's going to be able to at least get shots off against tighter defense, Dyson Daniels is going to get left open pretty consistently. But when you have special offensive players like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, timely cutting, good decision making, and improved playmaking is sometimes enough, with better defensive upside as well, to help you win a little bit more in the playoffs. He's got some good size to him, and I think Brooklyn could sell themselves on this pick at 23. 24, we got the Milwaukee Bucks here now, and for me with Milwaukee, I'm looking at guard/forward Malachi Branham from Ohio State, second Buckeye to go in the first round. Not very often we can say that. And he's someone who I think a lot of people are way higher on than I am. For me, the reason why I'm not high on him, he's not very quick. He's not going to be able to blow by guys consistently. We saw it a lot this year where he actually played with his back to the basket as a guard. And Wesley Matthews, made a living on that, who he's currently playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. And back in his time with Portland and Dallas, we saw that sometimes where he would actually post up other guards, specifically smaller guards. And I think Malachi Branham's going to do that in the NBA level. The issue here, though, with a Malachi Branham is defensively, you're not going to be able to put him on point guards ever, which this is why Milwaukee makes sense, because Drew Holiday's there for that. And you also have Giannis and Brook Lopez as rim protectors. And then you look at the situation here with Branham not being a creator. It's hard to see a team absolutely falling in love with that for me, specifically as someone who, when he goes through the draft combine, he's going to probably measure in around 6'5". He's not going to run super well. He's not going to be the most vertically explosive player. His physicals aren't going to pop like other players will. But I think he's a good player. And I think Milwaukee here gets way better drafting him. I think it really does shore up their rotation, specifically probably as an 8th guy his rookie year, but then probably at some point moving up, maybe even into the starting lineup at some spot. He would really help them right now in the playoffs, honestly. Had, he been on their roster this year with the Chris Middleton injury, he would have been a nice plug and play guy for them. But ultimately, I think Milwaukee gets really, really good value here at this spot at 24. 25, San Antonio Spurs here now. This pick comes from the Boston Celtics in the Derek White trade. And I'm going to have them take Ismail Kamagate in this deal. He's from Paris, France. He's someone who protects the rim fairly well and surprisingly not as a vertical threat like maybe you would have expected, because there's games where he has 9 or 10 blocks and you must think, oh, wow, this guy's super athletic. He actually does it a lot with positioning and his ability to stay upright. Now, he does have some vertical moments where he does, elevate and make some plays above the rim. But a lot of it is, really good positioning. He's going to meet guys at the spot and challenge vertically with his actual positioning and his IQ, which is a really nice thing to add here for San Antonio. I talked about their need to add a little bit more front court help. And I think we were able to do that with the Jovic, Kamagate, AJ Griffin trio. We added 2 good forwards and a center here that can help this team. Kamagate is also a very good rebounder of the basketball, which I think will help when Jakob Poeltl's out of the game. And this is about the best way to recover, assuming Jalen Duren's not on the board for you at 9. 26, Dallas Mavericks here now. This is my favorite team, so if you're a Mavericks fan, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel. I'm cheering for this team against Phoenix, man. Just watched Game 5 tonight. Did not pull it out, obviously. Hoping for Game 6 and 7. I'm really, really hoping. But here, for the Mavericks, I have them taking Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers. And I think this need has become more and more apparent throughout the postseason. They also have a really bad need for rebounding. They need to find a center. But at this spot at 26, I didn't feel like there was a center that moved the needle for me for Dallas. So I'm hoping they take Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers because I think he's the Jalen Brunson of this draft class. He's not the same type of player. Brunson's an undersized guard. Ron Harper Jr., there's not much undersized about him. He's about 240 pounds as a wing. He's fairly heavy set, and he's not the most vertically explosive player. He's not the fastest player, but he's technically the most sound player defensively in this class at this point. Moves his feet really, really well, knows how to use his chest defensively, beats guys to the spot, and challenges with regularity. And he's also a pretty polished offensive player, can put the ball on the deck a little bit, can knock down moving mid-range jump shots, can finish at the rim through contact, and can also knock down an open 3 ball. And he kind of has that it factor to him. He hit a bunch of big shots this year for Rutgers, specifically, I think 2 or 3 game winners as well. One of them was a crazy half-court shot that he hit after a Euro step. There's just things when you're watching players, you can kind of tell if the guy has it or not. And I think Ron Harper Jr. has it. Most people have a 2nd-round grade on this guy. I can't believe that. For me, he's a surefire 1st-round selection. He's someone that needs to go in the 1st round. If he doesn't, that is a travesty. I'm telling you, Jalen Brunson of this draft class, Ron Harper Jr., book it right now. Someone needs to take him. And when you look at the Mavericks in the series against Phoenix and the series against Utah, when Josh Green was in, yes, Jason Kidd, they got creative with the offense and using him as a screener and handoffs and DHOs and everything like that. But ultimately, that was a weakness, right? Teams are going to put their bigs on him, look at him as a non-shooter, and that's not going to be a threat. Ron Harper Jr. can knock it down. So this is an instant upgrade to me. I think this is a really good pickup, and defensively, there's no drop-off here. I think he's going to be a really, really good defensive player at the next level. 27, Golden State here now. A player I did consider for the Mavericks, but I just didn't think it was going to happen for Dallas, but I think it's worthwhile here for Golden State in Trace Jackson Davis out of Indiana. Again, another player that a lot of people have 2nd-round grades on, and I understand. If you look at him as a power forward, I would say he has a 2nd-round grade as well. But if you look at him as playing as, a maybe smaller center at about 6'9", but he's highly athletic, great verticality, it makes a lot of sense for Golden State here. What Trace Jackson Davis is a great screener, a great role guy, and someone who knows how to play an emotion offense and can move the basketball. And that's all the things that you need to be a center in for Golden State. You need to be a good screener. You need to be able to dive to the rim, and you need to be able to make the right play. And Trayce Jackson-Davis does all of those things. He's actually a very smart basketball player, which you don't typically see from a lot of centers. He's able to read defenses. People always ask about, a guy like, maybe a Christian Koloko or Kofi Cockburn from Illinois, and why I don't have them as first round picks here, because they don't read defenses. And Trayce Jackson-Davis actually can. It's very rare you get a center here in the 20s that can actually make those types of reads. And I think he's actually going to be a pretty nice player in the league, dependent on where he goes and how he gets utilized. But I think Golden State here would be perfect, specifically with Kevon Looney heading toward free agency. 28, Miami Heat here now on the board. And Miami, obviously, one win away from making the conference finals. At the time I'm recording this, we'll see how that series plays out against Philadelphia. We know how great their defense is. Duncan Robinson, surprisingly, not playing in this postseason as much. I think he's played only 1 minute against Philadelphia. So definitely up in the air with what his future looks like in Miami. We could see him potentially get traded. But here for the Heat, I went with an upside offensive player in Bryce McGowens from Nebraska. The reason why I went with McGowens here at this spot is he's got pretty good height to him at 6'7". He's got creation upside to him as well. And I think, in his year at Nebraska, he just struggled a ton because most defenses dialed in on him. And he was really the only good player on that Cornhuskers team. He's got good athleticism. And I think once you put him into an NBA system with more spacing and talent around him, he's going to really up his play. Zaire Williams kind of had the same issue at Stanford. We saw him go in the lottery. Now, McGowens, I don't think he'll go in the lottery. But I think at 28 here for Miami, with the question marks around Duncan Robinson, this is potentially on the table now at this spot where they would say, let's take a guard who can maybe put the ball on the deck a little bit and give us a little bit more offensive punch, specifically with some of Kyle Lowry's struggles. He missed a lot of time this year as well. Duncan Robinson not playing in the playoffs obviously has something to do with this too. I think Bryce McGowens maybe could slip back into the end of the first round. 29, Memphis here. In the Memphis Grizzlies, we already at this spot have addressed the forward spot with Kendall Brown. And here I'm going with Blake Wesley, a player who this feels almost too low to me, but at the same time, I couldn't find a really great landing spot because I really thought about Brooklyn. He's 6'5", so he's not that small, but I kind of thought this a little contradictory with Cam Thomas already there, that they didn't need to make this selection. So he did fall to 29 here for me. And I think this it's still reasonable because he's not the best playmaker. I think he's got a little bit of the do it myself mentality, and he's definitely got that upside to him where he can do it himself. But there are certain times too where he just doesn't read the floor and doesn't really read the game situation, which I don't like to say about a young kid because I want all these players to be successful. I really do. I love evaluating these players and looking at their strengths and weaknesses, and I wish I could make sure that they're all going to be successful in the league. And I think Blake Wesley could be, but I also think teams are going to look at this and say, well, certain times he takes terrible shots or doesn't move the ball, makes a bad decision, moves the ball at the wrong time, leaves his feet to make a pass. There's some negatives here, but there's also some serious upside. I think he's a really good athlete. He's got good size for the position, and there's some serious potential here with his shot creation upside. So for me, Memphis here gets another really good player that they take a developmental route on. And I think it's a perfect outcome in this draft for the Memphis Grizzlies. And then 30, Oklahoma City Thunder now here to conclude our first round mock draft. And for the Thunder, I'm going to have them go with forward Trevor Keels from Duke, a player who isn't the best player in this class by any stretch, and he's not going to be the most athletic player, but he's kind of just got that bulky frame to him that just seems to work as a forward in today's league. I liken him a lot to Dylan Brooks, who's a player that, maybe doesn't jump off the page too physically in terms of athleticism or, upside as a shooter or creator or offensive type player. But what Trevor Keels is going to do is play good physical defense, which we know in the postseason how valuable that is. Obviously, Oklahoma City maybe not going to get to the postseason for a little while yet, but I still think that they could use a little bit more physicality on the wing. And I think that they could also use someone who drives the basketball and gets to the rim. Good basketball usually includes paint penetration and getting to the rack. And Trevor Keels shows confidence doing that. He can also knock down open jump shots. Again, this is the last pick of the first round. Not every pick's going to be a home run. I think Trevor Keels is a relatively safe pick and someone who's going to have a nice long career, even if it's not as a star. So again, pick 30, Trevor Keels, I think a decent pickup. When you get to this spot of the draft, there's some guys you take with upside who have higher bust potential, or you could maybe take a safer approach here. For Oklahoma City, I took a safer approach. You could also maybe look at them using this pick and packaging with pick 12 to move up higher. But at 30, I think Oklahoma City here, Trevor Keels fits a need for them, gives them options to maybe explore Kenrich Williams trade as well this offseason if they feel one is good enough in terms of the return they could potentially get for him on the cheap contract he's on. But ultimately, Trevor Keels, a decent pickup here for Oklahoma City. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. Again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Go follow us on our socials, on our Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Links are in the bio for those. Leave a like on today's video as well, and subscribe to the channel. We're pushing toward 11,000. Let's try and get there after this mock draft. Thank you guys all so much for watching again. Really do appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Hopefully you appreciate all the hard work I've been putting in. And until next time, we'll catch you in the next Utility Sports video.